Okay. Here we go. Thanks for joining us, for joining me, joining each other. Elevators on Shabbat. So I want to break down this question of elevator use on Shabbat into what I think are the constituent issues, and sort of analyze some of the constituent issues, and then I think bring it together, and I think we sort of have a position about elevators. I guess just maybe before we begin, what would you say, just we can sort of identify the issues that we would have to work through regarding elevator use on Shabbat would be?
Pressing buttons.
Electricity. So pressing buttons because of electricity involved, right? Would be, okay. Electricity, good. What else?
Like the elevator has to work harder for you being in it, so you're causing more energy to be.
Okay, it's different from the electricity issue. Maybe there's like
I thought they were saying
fine.
like
So
direct
electricity of the
touching versus
button,
like
and then maybe
indirect-
there's an issue of the
You're indirectly causing more energy to be exerted through your
sort of,
body.
okay, you call it like the motor or something. Like the motor is like exerting itself for you. But what else? Sometimes.
Moved into Chol.
Just call that traveling.
Okay, traveling. Okay, it'd be very. It's like a horizontal elevator, maybe. Okay. What else?
I guess if you ask someone
Good.
else to do it.
Right. If you ask someone, particularly someone who isn't Jewish, okay, so that would call that a mir lenoch. You're asking a Gentile to do work for you. Okay, in this case, it would be like a doorman or such. Anything else?
You're just asking anything you can think of related to Shabbos and elevators?
Do you have another idea?
No, I mean, but I just think.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to identify.
Shabbos elevator.
Good, Shabbos elevator. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, good. So Shabbos elevators. There's a big controversy about Shabbos elevators. So you have to see how that would be. I guess the other issue would be no one's mentioned yet. Would be the electronic eye. Like, what if you're keeping the door open? If even a Shabbos elevator, sometimes if you like your interaction with the electronic eye. So that would be another issue that sort of, I think, even if the other issues are resolved, just sort of the electronic eye, that might be something that we're concerned about. Anything else? I don't think so. I just wanted to, but maybe you. Okay. Issues that we're sort of identifying issues we have to resolve, or sort of talk about pertaining to elevators. We identified pushing buttons and electricity, maybe the exertion of the motor, issues of asking a Gentile, for example, a doorman, to push buttons for you. What about Shabbos elevators? What about interaction with electronic? Oh, there's another one. Yes?
If you get stuck,
Oh, okay. Has that ever happened?
are you
Does anyone-
allowed to call the fire?
Sure. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure we'll get to that, but it's always good to name our fears. What else? There's one other thing I thought about. It's important. Well, the other issue is the variable of the need. Like, who is the person who wants? Like, is it a healthy person who wants to get to the second floor, or is it somebody who is 40 flights up? Right. That might be a factor.
About
Married ayin, explain how that would be.
Because if you say that you don't use other electric things in your elevator, then you tell someone, I can't, take a picture of the.
Great. So I wouldn't say married ayin. I would say that's not really married ayin is if you do something that looks like something forbidden. And if we conclude that elevator use under X, Y, and Z circumstances is permitted, I don't know that, maybe you'd say it looks like forbidden elevator use, but really it's permissible elevator use, so that would be married ayin. What you're really saying is more of like a public policy issue of like our interaction with the Gentile world requires them to take us seriously when we say we can't do things on Shabbos, and if we seemingly, get too clever and evade those restrictions, when it comes to elevator use, they won't take us seriously when we say we can't do X, Y. And is that what you're getting at, or is
Yes, you could do the other way also.
which would be?
I forgot I thought of one when you said it.
Okay, all right, if you think of it, let me know. Sarah, do you have source sheets? They're on, please grab, help yourself if everyone else doesn't. They're on the table, yes.
Going back to the Mara,
Yeah.
maybe saying that if someone doesn't look ill, or doesn't look like, or it does look like they would be
Great. Great. So if we conclude that elevator use is permissible for somebody who is unable to walk the stairs themselves, and somebody might in fact need to use the elevator but not look like it, that would be okay. Good. Okay. Let's. Okay. Fine. Good enough. So yes.
What about people who have children who are in a carriage?
Good. So yes, I would put that in the general rubric of is it somebody could use an elevator because it's a very high floor, or because they have an injury, or they're unable to walk that many flights, or because they're caring for children who are in a stroller and can't walk exactly. That'd be another perfect example of the opposite variable. So absolutely. Or not the opposite. That's the same variable of for whom is this leniency being extended or not, right? That would be right. So it's maybe you yourself are unable to walk, or maybe you're caring for somebody like an infant who is unable to walk. Yes.
I guess you could also talk about someone in good physical condition, if they should get an apartment on the 70th floor of a building when they're entering into.
Oh wow!
a
Are you
situation.
allowed to put yourself into a situation where you would need to rely on a leniency of right? If we say that it's permissible to use an elevator to go over the 10th floor, who says that a Jew has to live above the 10th floor, or or be friends with someone who lives above the 10th floor? Okay, right. Okay, good. Okay, so we're not going to deal with every single one of these questions. I hope, but maybe you'll have a better place to answer some of them or most of them, and. But okay. I also did not, history of the elevator is really fascinating. It's really tied with the growth of the American city. It's a really interesting story, which I once studied and don't know enough about to say, but it's an interesting story. It's really important story, and let's not talk about it. We're not talking about it now. So electricity on Shabbat, that's the first issue that was raised. I think that's the first one I want to talk about. What's the problem with electricity on Shabbat? Okay?
It's creating a fire.
Creating a fire. So that's one opinion. That was the... Hopefully, what do you say? Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Right, the engineers are saying hopefully it doesn't create a fire. So when electricity was invented and electronic devices began to spread, the poskim had to figure out what is this. And one suggestion that was promulgated by a number of poskim, among them Rav Kook, was that electricity is a form of fire, in that it kind of flows and it grows and it can consume things. It's similar to fire. Let's see about fire. Look at the first source. This is Rambam. This is Maimonides. Hamavir kol shuchev. Anybody who causes anything to burn, or creates even a small fire, is chayav, is guilty. For who shehei tzarich lafet le'efer. That's if you're burning something for the sake of the ashes that you create, right? Because biblically, all of the malachot, you only violate a biblical prohibition on Shabbat if you're doing something creative, and burning is destructive, unless the reason why you're kindling something is to make something productive, which would be charcoal, okay, or ash, okay, which is a substance that you might want to make by burning something. That's a classic biblical fire, a biblical violation of fire on Shabbat, because that's creative. But if you light a fire, just destroy something, that's destructive. You never violate Shabbat on a biblical level if you do something destructively. And if you set fire to somebody else's food or somebody else's property, you're guilty, even though it's destructive. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but if you destroy destructively with the intention of being cathartic, okay, if you burn somebody your enemy's house down on Shabbat, you're guilty of violating Shabbat because that was cathartic for you. That was a productive act. It wasn't a wanton act of destruction. It accomplished something for you psychologically. It had a psychic benefit, and so you're guilty of eating Shabbat. Okay, v'chen. Let's skip the last two lines in Hebrew. The last little paragraph in English. If you heat a piece of iron in order to strengthen it as part of the forging process, and then you're gonna submerge in water afterwards. Have you ever seen blacksmiths? They or on movies, they heat stuff and then they put it in the water. That's what temper the steel or something like that. Okay, if you do that act of heating up the metal until it glows, that's a violation of Shabbat because of Havara. There's nothing actually being consumed. The metal isn't, it's not burning the way a piece of wood burns, which is consumed by the fire. The metal gets so hot that it starts to glow and emits light. And that's a violation of Havara. Elsewhere, Rambam says that's a violation of Bishul, of using heat to transform a substance to make it, when you're cooking. You're not eating it, but you're using heat to transform something. So you heat metal until it glows. That's a biblical violation, according to Rambam, either Havara, burning, or Bishul, or cooking. So what does that sound like, heating a piece of metal until it glows? Do we have any examples you can think of heating, other than blacksmiths? Who heats metal until it glows? An electric light. So we used to say all around us are little pieces of metal that are so hot that they glow. But no longer, because these are all LED lights and CFLs. But the old-fashioned incandescent light bulbs are inside the light. There's a filament. It's a little piece of metal which gets electric current passes through, and I guess resistance is created, which creates heat, and it gets so hot that it glows. So an incandescent light bulb, I think, is indeed a biblical violation of Shabbat because of fire, not the fire of the electricity, the fire of the light bulb. And indeed, any electric device that does a prohibited action on Shabbat is a violation of that action. If you have an electric lawnmower and you cut grass, that's a biblical violation of katsira, of cutting something growing. If you have an electric oven that cooks, that you can use that to violate Shabbat in a Doraita level. If you have, an electric, press or mill or whatever. If you use electronics to violate Shabbat, any of the 39 Halakhot, that's the same violation of Shabbat. But most poskim have said that the electricity per se doesn't seem to be like fire, because electricity is in fact, it isn't fire, it's just something else. It's a flow of electrons through wires. It isn't actually fire. Jeff, you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the year before you came to Princeton, I had a big argument with Boaz Haberman about whether electricity was fire.
Who
So
said
I wish
what?
you were here.
Oh.
I was trying to make the case that electricity as an exothermic reaction for which the energy is used for productive purpose has the same notion of fire, and Boaz was very strongly disagreeing with that.
That's awesome. So Boaz,
You should ask Boaz when you see him.
okay, so hopefully he'll show up for Mincha, if not for the shiur, and you can recreate that. See how he's.
I'm not sure why.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
I guess if you go back to like the coal burning power plants, there's fire there, right?
Oh, yeah. So that's another issue with electricity. That's a whole other issue with electricity per se. Maybe.
Because you're drawing it. from
Yeah. Right. Like if you're using electricity, you're implicit in the power generator, which is maybe fire, or presumably there's often a fire, unless it's a nuclear or geothermal or hydroelectric. But if it's a coal plant, as I guess very common in the Midwest.
If it's geothermal, you still have an issue of the water involved.
The issue of the water involved. Correct. Yeah, and that's Chamei Tiberia, right? It's yeah. Okay.
So in which case I would look at it kind of like the way that you can increase an existing flame on Yom Tov.
So if you say that electricity is fire, if you increase the volume of an electronic device, or you adjust an electronic device that's already on, you tune a radio, that would be not a violation at all, because you're not, no, it would be. If it's fire, it would be, because it'd be like increasing fuel. And also, if you're drawing more current, the fire is, it's not really true, because the power company isn't, they say turn off the lights, save electricity. It's not really true, right? You're not actually, like, if 1 million people turn off their lights, then the power company goes, oh, look, we can, they can turn off reactor 2. But if one person turns off their light, they're not going to notice that. They're not going to... in terms of electricity use, they say that, it's mostly non-Jews working at the factory, and they're doing it for the benefit of non-Jews. So it's non-Jews burning coal for the sake of non-Jews, and we're allowed to get that benefit. If
hot water in a big apartment building.
Comparable, yeah, or if a non-Jew does a work for another non-Jew, and Jew can benefit from that. In Israel, some are strict about using, and what some do is, so one lenient position is to say that they need to keep the power plants operational for the sake of hospitals, and so once the power plant is running for hospitals, the rest of us can just, keep our lights plugged in. But there are some who are strict, and they hook up their, at least in the olden days, they would hook up their, in Jerusalem, they would connect to the Jordanian power system. So as not to, what?
Use generators.
Yeah.
On Shabbat.
Cool. So, all right. So that's still, yeah. So people are machmir. I guess that's a better or different solution. Yeah. I think other people, some just have like a candle. You have like a candle burning. Also, it's a way like a. But okay. So that is an issue. But that's not like a elevator issue per se. That's like a general electricity issue.
Yeah.
Another theory about electricity, about about electricity is this was adopted. So Rav Kook, by the way, again, Rav Kook felt that it's like fire. And made arguments, I guess, not unlike what Jeff's advocated. Another very dominant position. This was adopted by, among others, the Chazon Ish, who was sort of the founding rabbi of Israeli Haredi Jewry. He came from Lithuania and settled in Eretz Yisrael in the 20s, I believe, 30s, and died in the 50s. He's a character in Chaim Grada's amazing novel, The Yeshiva, which is an incredible, in Yiddish it was called Semach Atlas, an incredible, massive novel, the most accurate and compelling literary description of Orthodox life and Yeshiva life ever. And all the characters are based on real people, and one of the heroes, is the Chazon Ish. And the author, Chaim Grada, is also one of the characters, Chaim, and he, in real life, also studied with the Chazon Ish in his youth. Chazon Ish thinks that electricity is boneh, is building. What are you building? You're building a circuit. And he also said it's like makav patish, which is a derivative of building. If you are constructing something, the final hammer blow, the last thing that changes something from being not a thing to being fully operational, whatever it is you're making, that final hammer blow is called makav patish, and that is a violation of Shabbat. Some people are strict about not taking off, cutting the tags off of clothing, because maybe that's makav patish. You can't wear it with the tags. So they say, no, you can wear the clothing with the tags. That's a question around makav patish. Another question, what about winding a watch? Is that makav patish or not? So maybe it is because it's not operational. Maybe it's not makav patish because the watch is meant to start and stop anyway. But you have a radio, and it's silent, right? It's sitting there. It'll be silent for 100 years, and you push a button, you connect a circuit, you've completed that circuit, and now it's making music. So pushing that button is makav patish. You've completed a circuit. It's now an operational whatever it is. And based on that, Chazon Ish felt any electronic device is a biblical violation. Anything that is completing a circuit is a biblical violation of Shabbat. Yes?
So that's like turning on an electrical device?
Turning
or
on.
adjusting?
But adjusting would be totally fine. If it's already on, you could adjust it. There'll be no problem. I mean, but biblically, maybe you shouldn't do it for other reasons, but yeah, absolutely. So Chazon Ish was, that leads to a lot of very strict implications, including for, microphones and hearing aids, as well as, any elevator, telephone, radio, for any electronic device that you're turning on would be, it would only be permissible under circumstances where a biblical violation could be done, which exists, but it would be similarly strict. So,
Wait, so the act of plugging
I was gonna say,
in.
not plugging in, turning on. Because you plug in, it's still, you plug in, the electricity is still not doing it, right? The electricity is a circuit. It's only the circuit that makes right? So it's plugged in, the electricity is coming in from that power source. It goes into your radio, but then there's a gap in right? You push the button, and then the bridge is done, and the circuits all connect. Now, I wonder, I think digital electronics might be a little bit different. I don't know that you have circuits in the same kind of way with digital, like it's all, I don't know, I mean, it's I guess at some basic level it is, and yet I don't know that pushing button, like things that have computer chips, it's not quite as simple and mechanical that like circuits are opening and closing. It's, or if they are, they're like microscopic circuits that aren't, so it could be a little bit different. It could be that even for the Chazon Ish, once you have things done through circuits, it could be a little bit different. You have grumma switches, which, yeah.
Like a keyboard to use like a capacitor, so like by pressing the button, you're essentially releasing the charge within the capacitor in the circuit.
Interesting. Which is that completing a circuit though, or not?
Well, it makes complete a circuit down the line. That it, sends a signal to something else, which activates.
Interesting. Okay. But it's not like, it's different from like a old like a cassette player, right, or a telephone. It's a little bit different. Okay. So Chazon Ish's position was rejected very emphatically by Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who is source 2 and source 3, and many other poskim came after. Rav Moshe Feinstein implicitly accepts Rav Shlomo Zalman's critique, and as did Rav Yosef. Just again, timeline. Chazon Ish dies 1950s. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach died 1995. So he's like a generation, really two generations later. He was sort of one of the, I remember when he died reading, people say that he was the last figure who was kind of universally respected in Orthodoxy as a halachic scholar. That the religious Zionist world, the Haredi world, all sort of saw his halachic, his psak as being authoritative, reliable, and turned to him with questions. So I don't know, I'm not sure I can think of a better person after him. So anyway, he died in 1995. Rav Yosef accepts this position. He died just a couple of years ago, and Rav Moshe Feinstein also seems to accept this position as well. And he says electricity is not fire, nor is it bona. It's not makeh patch, not completing something. And the sort of basically the other paradigm, where something is not makeh patch, you're not completing something, is if the item that you're making is meant to be assembled and disassembled. Like a great example of that would be a folding chair. When I take a folding chair and I open it, would you say I built a chair? No, you'd say I'm operating a folding chair. So too, when you turn on a radio, or when you push the elevator button and the elevator starts moving, I'm not making an elevator, I'm operating an elevator. It's made, right, it's finished long before you're pushing buttons, turning switches on and off. So you're not, it's just not that. Here's an example. Source 2, אף על פי כן, יותר נראה דמקל פאצ'ש, היינו דווקא כשחסר עדיין תיקון שהאומין רגילים לעשותו, ונשאר כך בתיקון זה לעולם. אף על פי מגדם שמצדד לומר שעריכת שעון היינו מקל פאצ'ש, כבר נתברר דתמו הוא מפני שעיקר תפקידו של שעון הוא להיות תמיד ערוך ולהראות את השעה, אלא דחשיב בכל פעם שנפסק הלכות כמתקלקל, לכן מי שעורך אותו חשיב כמתקנא. מה שאין כן הכא אדרבה, עיקר גמר מלאכתם הוא שלא יהיו מחוברים תמיד עם הזרם, כי אם דווקא בשעת שימוש. So he's comparing to a strict, Pri Megadim is strict, and says you can't wind a watch on Shabbat. Remember the old-fashioned watches, you had to wind them every, right? So if the watch stops, Pri Megadim is strict and says, okay, you can't start it up again, because if it stops, that's like a watch that doesn't work anymore. That's a ruined, inoperative watch. And because the point is, you keep it wound so it never stops. So once it stops, you can't wind it on Shabbat. That starts it working. That is makeh patish. That's taking something that is useless and inoperable, and you're making it work to tell time again. Which is different from turning on an electronic device, because an electronic device is not supposed to perpetually operate. A watch is only useful if it's constantly going. If it stops, it's not really going to tell you the time anymore. Whereas a radio is not supposed to always be on. It's supposed to be sometimes on and sometimes off. An elevator is not always supposed to move. It's only supposed to move when you push the button. And so he thinks there's a distinction. Even the strict opinion of Pri Megadim when it comes to winding watches is more strict, and an electronic device is more lenient. There are 3 long tshuvot in Minchas Shlomo in this first section. Source 3 is an excerpt of one of his longer ones. The full, if I didn't, I cut a few pages out. I think it goes to like 15 or 16 pages, just to get a sense of how seriously he took this issue and how comprehensively he dealt with all of the challenges. If you look on page 5, though, this is a little bit, I'll read to you. מבואר על כל פנים דכוונת, the underlined part, okay? מבואר על כל פנים דכוונת החזון איש היא כמו שכתב בספרו סימן נון אות ט' דהוריל ויש כאן תיקון צורה להגשם ונעשה על ידי זה שימוש, לכן חשיבו נעיין שם, ובעיניי לא ידעתי על מה קרוי לתיקון צורה. הלא ברור הדבר שגם חדר קטן מאוד אשר הוא אטום בלי שום חלון, כי עם פתח בלבד עם דלת. אף על גב דבשעה שהדלת סגורה יש שם רק חושך ולא אור, וגם אי אפשר לשום אדם להיות שם בגלל חוסר אוויר לנשימה, ונמצא שהפתח אינו משמש רק בכניסה ויציאה בלבד, שהרי רק על ידי הפתיחה והכנסת אוויר יכולים להיות בבית, ורק אז הבית ראוי לשימוש. אפילו הכי מותר ודאי לפתוח ולסגור בשבת, ולא חשיב כלל kibona visoter. Imagine, he says, a room. Imagine a room which is dark, with no windows and no light. And the only way in or out is one door. And if you go into that room and the door is closed, it's so dark and so stuffy that you couldn't stay there. You can't breathe, okay? Very claustrophobic. Imagine like a closet, okay? But that's this room. Now, no one would say you can't open the door on Shabbat because opening the door is transforming this space into a habitable house. Or you wouldn't say, I'm building a house by opening the door and making this space a place where people can go and sit and enjoy themselves. You wouldn't say that. It's just opening a door, okay? It was built before. It was built in such a way that when the door's closed, you can't do anything inside. And when you open the door, okay, the air comes in and out, and there's light, and people can go and sit there and have a cup of tea. But no one says, I opened the door, now I built a room. I closed the door, now I destroyed a room. Right? You wouldn't. So that's like opening and closing a circuit. You're not making a radio when you turn it on. You're just operating the radio, and that's his major point. So he rejects the position that electricity. It's not fire. It's not bona. It's not building something. It's not makabe patish. And what he ends up saying is that there's really no clear biblical prohibition of using electricity. Rather, it's almost like a drabanan. It's a rabbinic prohibition, except can't really be a rabbinic prohibition because, the Talmudic rabbis didn't know about it. So it's sort of like a rabbinic prohibition. There's a universal practice from the time that electricity was invented until today that Sabbath observant Jews don't use electricity, and that's why we don't use electricity. It's utidachol, it's workday activity. It shouldn't be done, but the threshold now is much lower. The threshold for using electricity on Shabbat for Shlomo Zalman and Moshe and Avad Yosef is now threshold by which you would violate a rabbinic prohibition as opposed to the threshold to violate a biblical prohibition, which is much higher. So the stakes are much lower, the category is much lower, and in his psakim we see that. I said a lot. Questions? Yes, Sean.
So you're saying that this opinion, which is universally accepted among Orthodox, basically says that the only reason electricity is prohibited on Shabbat is because we don't use electricity on Shabbat.
Yes. But let me just say, I want to defend that a little bit. I'm going to take 5 minutes to defend that, okay? And I want to say it's interesting. Chaim Seiman is a professor he teaches at Villanova Law School, and he's also a learned Jew, and he's writing a book on legal theory and halakha. He's publishing a book on legal theory and halakha, and he commented a year or two ago. There was that whole Shabbos app on your smartphone thing, and he sort of noted that everyone was against it, or just about as far as everyone was against it, even though the Orthodox community is divided ideologically in so many, women's issues and gay issues, and including this and Zionism, all these sort of contentious issues within Orthodoxy. Everyone agreed the Shabbos app was not something we wanted. And he posited it was because Shabbos is basically working for us. We kind of know what Shabbos ought to be like. We know what it should feel like. It's part of our religious life that works for the most part. Whereas gender, we don't know what does it mean to be a Jewish woman in 2016. We don't quite know, or we have conflicting visions of what that's supposed to look like, and so that's where our ideological debates take place. Whereas Shabbos, we know what Shabbos works for us. It still works for us, and so there isn't a lot of contention around Shabbos issues. Another way of saying this, Rambam writes that Rambam writes that the reason why muktzah was invented as a category by the rabbis was then they looked around and saw that Jews were no longer mostly living on farms. The Torah is a sort of assumes an agricultural lifestyle, but at the time of the Talmudic rabbis, Jews were mostly living in cities. So that was a huge transformation that happened to Jews between the biblical period and the rabbinic period. We moved from farms to cities. And the rabbis looked around and saw what are the prohibitions on Shabbat? I can ask you, when was the last time you plowed? When was the last time you reaped or winnowed? Right? Have you ever winnowed? Right? Okay. So, in fact, your weekday, your weekday is devoid of most of the 39 categories of forbidden labor on Shabbat. And so, how is Shabbat different from the weekday? If even during the week you don't do these melachot? And the Rambam writes that the rabbis looked around and they said, yeah, you could refrain from violating all of the 39 melachot, and the shops are open, and you go to work like normal, and you buy and sell and trade, and you do all sorts of which are not biblical prohibitions. not biblical prohibitions, and
Certainly nach.
hmm?
It's certainly nach.
It's certainly nach, correct. It's not one of the 39 melachot though, okay?
Right, but it's before the time of Tal.
That's true, that's true, that's true. So they would say maybe Yeshayahu and his Beit made that because they're, okay? So the rabbis realized there was a need to have this category of muktzah, to have other restrictions against commerce, so that Shabbat would be different even for urban Jews. And for us, I think not using electricity is probably right. I mean, we don't even, how much do you write with a pen and paper during the week? Not using, putting your phone away, putting the computer away, not interacting with electricity, I think is one of the ways that makes the day really as distinctive as possible. And so I think that really ought to be embraced. Meaning even though some thought it was fire, some thought it was bona, that doesn't quite seem to work out that way, not really any of those categories, but everyone sort of got it, that electricity was a major way in which we interact with the world during the week, and therefore something we shouldn't do on Shabbat. There's also concept of U'tidachol, we don't do things on Shabbat that are weekday-like activities, even if there's no other violation of Shabbat inherent in them. And I think, again, using a computer, using a phone, watching television would all be in that rubric. Except, once we understand that there's no biblical violation, then all of a sudden, and it's, let's say, we treat it like a d'Rabbanan rabbinic violation, so then the parameters for overcoming it are much easier to kind of see. So how can you can violate a rabbinic prohibition, like Bein HaShemashot, after between sunset and dark by asking a Gentile. That's even right for the sake of you can violate a rabbinic for the shvut to shvut makom mitzvah, for the sake of a mitzvah. You can ask a Gentile to violate a rabbinic prohibition if it enables a mitzvah, right? So all of a sudden we have all these other we can sort of play these games or reason in these ways because the stakes are much lower. The threshold becomes much lower. In terms of asking a Gentile to do something for you on Shabbat, another example, right? If you do a melacha on Shabbat in an indirect way, so instead of pushing a button with your finger, you push a button with your nose. Okay, so that's also right. Instead of writing with your hand, you write with your mouth. That also makes it into a rabbinic violation. You can combine 2 degrees of rabbinic violation, like pushing a button is only rabbinic to begin with, and I'm doing it in an unusual manner, so then we have 2 degrees of rabbinic violation, and for the sake of enabling a mitzvah, that seems to be it's often an avenue to make things permissible. Yes?
According to this perspective then, is there absolutely no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov?
Yes. Right. Whereas according to the theory that electricity is fire, then you would be much more lenient on Yom Tov. And there was, I think, a time, people used to turn on light bulbs on Yom Tov. That was the thing in the 50s. People who took that fire model very seriously would turn on light bulbs on Yom Tov. Okay. So asking a Gentile to do work, let's look at source 5, just to remind ourselves in general, you can't ask a Gentile to do anything that is forbidden for a Jew. That's the basic rule, but there are exceptions. So here's from the Shulchan Aruch. Just to orient ourselves, the Shulchan Aruch, this is 16th century, basic authoritative code of Jewish law. When I say authoritative, I just mean that, not that everyone always agrees with him, but that's the locus of all the subsequent conversations about these topics in halakha are commenting around the words of the Shulchan Aruch, and he kind of sets the debate. Okay, so if a Gentile lights a lamp for a Jew, no other Jew can benefit from that light. Even if somebody else, not the Jew for whom it was lit. And then Haggah, the Ramah, Moshe Isserlis, writing in contemporary times, 16th century Krakow, he writes the Ashkenazi gloss on the Shulchan Aruch. They were rivals. I think I've told the story to some of you a few times. They were rivals in the sense that they each wanted to publish first, and the Joseph Caro and Tzfat published first, so the Ramah was left with writing the Ashkenazi gloss, which is the second time that happened to him. But in so doing, he then makes the Shulchan Aruch this book that's useful to all Jews. Okay, so he says, "Ve'ein chiluk bazeh ben katsav l'schar o lo katsav o shasu bekablanut o b'schirut ahov Yisrael ne'aneh b'melacha atzma b'shabbat asur b'chol inyan." Okay, it doesn't matter if you pay him, if you don't pay him, if he's a contractor, if he has a salary. It doesn't matter if he does work on Shabbat for a Jew, he can't benefit from it. You're allowed to. he can do it for his own, right? If you can bring stuff to the dry cleaner on Thursday and pick it up on Monday, and he can do whatever he wants. That's none of your business, right? As long as he could do it not on Shabbat, you don't have to know when he did it. You don't have to stipulate, you can't work on don't clean my clothes on Shabbat, right? As long as there's time for him to do it, or her to do it not on Shabbat, okay? Same with any other, like car repair, stuff like that. Aval, im hidliku litzarko, litzaracho leYisrael, afilu ein bo sakana. But it's mutar lakol, okay? But if litzar ketanim, tehu kechodesh ein bo sakana, mutar lakol. So this is important. However, if the Gentile does it for himself, or he does it on behalf of a sick Jew, or for a Jewish child, then it's permissible to anyone else to derive benefit from it. And this is because a Gentile can do work on Shabbat on behalf of someone who's sick, even if they're not in danger. If someone is dangerously sick, then any Jew should leap to rescue them and do whatever malach is necessary to rescue them. But if somebody is sick and not in danger, then a Gentile can do work on their behalf, and any other Jew can benefit from that work. And a child has the status as a sick person, meaning they're not in danger. A sick person is not in danger. They're stable, but they're infirm in some way. That's basically what a child is like. They're more vulnerable. They're weaker. They're not as strong. And so every child has a status, presumptive status, or we give them the status of a chol she'ein bo sakana, of a sick person who's not in danger. Therefore, a Gentile can do malacha on their behalf, and any other Jew can benefit from that. So this would mean that even if the strict opinion of Chazon Ish, even if we think pushing an elevator button is a biblical violation, a non-Jewish doorman can push the button if the Jew is sick and can't, unable to walk themselves, or if there's a child there as well. There's a child there. So that would be the strict position would be walk up the stairs yourself, unless you're with the child, or a sick adult, in which case you can ask the Gentile to push the button and everyone can run it together. That's a strict opinion. If you're operating with the more lenient position that it's not a biblical violation at all, then you wouldn't even need the sick person or the child.
And you can ask directly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about like the whole Shabbos thing where you're not supposed to ask.
So again, you can't ask, because if there's a sick person or there's a child, you can ask directly. And if it's not really a malacha, if it's just a derbanan, you can also ask directly. That's the other meaning, or it's like a derbanan. Again, if you're strictly a Chazon Ish, you would have to, and there's no child or a sick person, you would have to do that, get on with them and get off where they get off or something, or that would be. But they couldn't do it for you. Yeah.
This draw is thinking between asking directly and you have it arranged ahead of time that they're just going to do this.
If they're doing it for you, that's not good.
Like asking that whole option.
Yeah, no. So if you're doing it for, if we're talking about an actual malacha, an actual biblical violation of Shabbat, it doesn't matter if you ask in advance, if you ask on Shabbat. If you're doing it for you, that's a problem. But if we are operating under the majority opinion of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rav Moshe and Vad Yosef, that there's no biblical violation implicit in electricity per se, then you could, in that case, you could ask the Gentile to push it himself for the sake of a mitzvah. For the sake of a mitzvah. Let's do a little bit more. So too, it's a lamp. What about they make a big hearth fire, a big fire to heat a house? Maybe some are more strict with the fire because they might throw in a few extra logs if they know that the Jews are going to benefit as well. The Ramah says, but if he does it in the Jew's house, you don't have to leave. Not so strict you have to leave the house and not enjoy the heat. But artzot karot is important. In cold lands, mutar lakum lasot medura b'shvil hakatanim umutarim hagdolim hitchamem bo. Okay, in cold places, for the sake of kids, again, who have the status of a chola, they can light a fire, a biblical violation for the sake of the children, and the adults can benefit from that fire as well. Afilu b'shvil hagdolim im hakor gadol. And if it's very cold, even adults can also benefit from this Gentile lighting fire on their behalf. Shakol cholim etzel hakor. It's a great phrase in rabbinic and halacha. Everyone is sick when confronted by the cold. Okay, the cold sort of makes everyone, no one can withstand cold. Everyone is sick, confronted by cold. We all have that status of the cold, and so therefore we can ask a Gentile to light a fire, a biblical violation, on our behalves if it's very cold, because again, all of us are like that sick person, and this is like the classic Shabbos goy who goes from house to house and lights fires. And then he says, "Lokot tam hanogim heter af al pi she'ena kor gadol b'yomo," right? And not like those who just have them light fires even when it's not all that cold. It has to really be cold. And I think it's, and I was taught that it's the same, just as everyone is vulnerable for great cold, so too everyone is vulnerable for great heat. And if you can ask, a Shabbos goy can biblically violate Shabbat by lighting a fire, lighting your furnace, so too they can, turn on the air conditioner if it wasn't on before. I'm sorry, what?
Isn't it strange if you would talk about, he lived in Israel?
Yeah, what did he know about cold?
Or, why would he talk about the extreme heat?
Why wouldn't he talk about,
I wouldn't say that it's an automatic assumption because he lived in a place that had extreme heat and he mentioned the others.
right, so he didn't know, but he didn't have air conditioning. So in other words,
There is nothing to do.
right. There are things to do. You can fan yourself, or you can go, dump a bucket of water on your head. But it's not like air conditioning changed. Also, just like the elevator transformed urban life, the air conditioning transformed everything about the world and where we live and how we live, et cetera, et cetera. So I think now that you have this, and people, in Chicago, you have that terrible. There's a book. Right? What's that book? There's a book in that. It's a terrible heat wave in Chicago, right? Maybe 1,000 people died. It was an awful. 400, sorry, okay. But it's pretty bad, right? It's pretty awful, right? So there's a book about why and how, right? So it's a terrible thing. It's very dangerous. But again, it's not. You don't even need that. You don't have to. That's only if you're going to say that turning on the air conditioner is a biblical violation of Shabbat, which Chazon Ish, etc. But if it's majority opinion that electricity isn't quite as fraught, then it's much more obvious that just for discomfort you can adjust the air conditioner. Certainly, if a whole bunch of people in shul and the air conditioner isn't on, so no one's in danger. I can just go home. But no, we're uncomfortable. When we're here for a mitzvah, we can add we can ask the Gentile to adjust the the thermostat in here, or turn a light in the shul if the shul light is off, etc. AJ, and then
What's the definition of a child?
I'd assume, let's say pre-bar bat mitzvah. That'd be my assumption. I don't know why I would. So, reading it all together, this is, sorry, Elise, you had a comment?
So, in terms of kind of a follow-up to that, let's say you have a baby, right? It's going to be carried anyway. So the baby's not going to be benefiting really at all from the elevator. It's the parents who are going to be benefiting from the elevator.
The baby doesn't care if you go rise in the elevator or not, as long as the baby gets carried. I would say the baby, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. So, I would say, here's this infant who needs to get to the 10th floor of this apartment building. So you can push the button for the infant, but you say, no, the infant doesn't really care. The infant's happy to have the parent schlep the baby up the stairs. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it seems to me like the infant is a passenger in the elevator. That would be fine, even if the infant doesn't realize that he or she is benefiting from the elevator. I'll think about that a little bit more. But again, this is all, once we're in this post Rosh Hashanah Zalman Orbach world, we accept that understanding, you can really, it's much less necessary. This is a drasha that Rabbi Haskell Lookstein. Rabbi Haskell Lookstein should live and be well, one of the great congregational rabbis in America. He's the rabbi at Congregation KJ and Kehilat Jacob in New York. His father, Rabbi Joseph Lookstein, was the rabbi at KJ. His grandfather, Rabbi Margolis, Moshe Zvi Margolis, the Ramaz, was the rabbi at KJ. So this family has been rabbis at this. Although actually, no, he's actually no longer. He stepped down, right? He retired. Sorry. Until a few weeks ago, he was the rabbi at KJ. 3 generations in his family were rabbis in this congregation now. Rabbi Steinmetz is the rabbi there. In 2006, he gave a sermon in tribute of his great-grandfather. Sorry, Ramaz was his great-grandfather. Joseph Lookstein married the daughter of... Joseph Lookstein married the... Okay, it says great-grandson, so okay. But Joseph Lookstein inherited the shul from his grandfather. And Haskell Lookstein inherited the shul from his father. And the 70th yahrzeit of his great-grandfather in 2006, he gave a sermon. The sermon is available. I'm happy to send you the entire sermon. But here's a little piece of that sermon. He talks about his grandfather as a posek, as a reasonable, responsible, posek, halachic scholar who was connected to his community and provided halachic guidance that was appropriate for his community and their needs and sensitive to their needs. An example of this was the way Rabbi Regoli's used the elevator on Shabbat when it was operated by a non-Jew. He lived on the second floor, and in his later years, when it was difficult for him to climb the stairs, he went into the elevator and a non-Jew operated the elevator for him. My father, that's Joseph Lichty, describes his father when he came for a visit to this community and saw Rabbi Regoli's enter the elevator on Shabbat, and he followed him into the elevator with his knees shaking because it was the first time he had ever been in an elevator on Shabbat. Rabbi Regoli's views were echoed by Rabbi Soloveitchik in a personal conversation with me in the early 1980s when he reiterated what I had heard him say in a shir more than 20 years before that. He said that using an elevator on Shabbat when operated by a non-Jew is permissible under two circumstances. One, where it is not reasonable to do so otherwise. For example, when one is going above the fifth floor. Okay, so that's the famous sixth floor and up stock of Manhattan. And two, where one is going to perform one of the mitzvot of Shabbat. For example, eating one of the Shabbat meals, visiting the sick, learning Torah, or another kind of Shabbat activity. So this is, Soloveitchik is basically assuming we're treating it like a rabbinic violation, and you can ask, so it's shut to shut makom mitzvah. You can ask a Gentile to violate a rabbinic prohibition of Shabbat to enable one to do a mitzvah. So going up to visit someone who's sick, going up to have a Shabbat meal, those would be circumstances in which one could ask a Gentile to push a button for you directly.
Coming to shul.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, davening, absolutely, yeah.
Because it's coming down also.
So coming down is a little harder, because it's often harder to have the Gentile push a button to come down unless you have some, So you could arrange for somebody to come get you, like maybe some buildings the doorman might come get you at 8:45 in the morning and bring you down, or you arrange to send the elevator up. You're waiting at 8:44 in your lobby, and they send the elevator up, and you come, and they push 12 and 1, and they send it up to you, and you come down. You could arrange that in advance. But I think it's also permissible for someone who would otherwise be unable to leave his or her apartment on Shabbat to push a button in an indirect way, like in a Yisrael with a shinui in an unusual way. This Rabbi Linzer taught pasuk in this way, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Again, like it's pushing a button in an unusual way, and makes it a rabbinic violation. It's like a drabanan way of doing a malacha. And the elevator use anyway is only a drabanan, and to enable a mitzvah of like onei Shabbos, and you're having an enjoyable Shabbat, you don't spend the whole day in your apartment. That would enable someone to push a button in an unusual way. And there's one possible reason, if you wanted to push back against that, you would say, this is I think also what Shlomo Zalman says, doing a malacha in an unusual way, what does that mean? Like writing with your left hand or writing with your mouth, that's a very awkward and slow and less effective way to do a malacha. Pushing a button with your nose, it's actually, like it's unusual, but like the actual thing you're doing is pushing the button, and it works just as well. If you would, right? The actual mechanics of the operation of the device is identical. If you turn on a light switch with your ear, the light goes on as soon as the switch goes on. Which is kind of different from writing with your, right? It's not quite the same. So there's some pushback around that point, which you could think about. Yes, a few people had a question. Yeah.
So the thing with the fifth floor.
Yeah.
Would anyone say that it would be more or less than a fifth floor? It seems kind of arbitrary.
So I think that what he's trying to get at, it's sort of like.
But like at what point do you
Yeah.
say, like, oh, I'm a young person, I can walk up 20 flights of stairs, or
Yeah.
10 flights of stairs, or an older person?
So to me, I see that as an approximation of this, like everyone is sick when it comes to the cold, or everyone is sick when it comes to great heats, right? There's certain like kind of physical circumstances which like human beings are just, we're all vulnerable when confronted with these things. So you could say, I don't know, like what temperature can you allow the Shabbos goy to light your furnace? Does it have to be 20 below? Does it have to like how uncomfortable would you have to be? Like, I don't know. So at some point, it's a little bit arbitrary. At some point, it's a judgment call. At some point, if you say, if it has to be like, it's 40 degrees outside, and you have kids in the house, or, like if you can put on a sweater and be okay, I can put on a sweater, and I can put on a winter coat and eat my dinner, is that, at some point, there's going to be a certain amount of subjectivity. At some point, you have to make a decision, and it's going to be a little bit arbitrary which side of any distinction you make. So 5 flights seems to me like, during the weekday, if you're working in an office building or school or hospital, you might walk up 3 flights of stairs, just because you don't want to wait for the elevator. But it's unlikely you would walk up 6 flights of stairs because you don't want to wait for the elevator, unless, right? So that would be maybe how, So I think even a healthy person who could walk up 10 flights and not be out of breath and not be in danger, I think it's sort of like, what's a reasonable thing to spend your time doing on Shabbat? And so that's sort of like 6th floor and above, you push the button, otherwise you walk. And again, obviously, if you have a bad ankle and you can't, then you're like an actual chola, and then, you would need to have that 5th floor rule, yeah.
No, I was going to say, in New York, they have all those walk-ups, like 4th floor walk-ups, and I feel like when it gets beyond that, that's when you have an elevator.
Oh yeah, and they're building codes. That's a good, right? That's what they're right. Every city has building codes, right? Above a certain height, you're not allowed to. You have to have an elevator in these buildings. In Israel and Jerusalem, they have buildings where they built them on the side of the hill, so they can have like 10 floors without an elevator because they have 2 entrances. That's a way to get around the zoning. But yeah, no, right. That's the zoning laws also. So that's another way to approximate this. We want people in our city to be living in decent housing, so no one should walk more than a certain number of flights of stairs. Yeah, so that's yes, Marilyn and then John.
When I was looking for a condo, I must have looked at over 30 because I wanted to be in a certain geographical area, and I said no higher than the 5th floor because I was able to walk up 5 flights of stairs. Now I'm on the 4th floor, which is equivalent to a 5th because there's a mezzanine, 59 stairs. Correctly, I can't walk even 1 flight of stairs.
No, so you should certainly. You can certainly have a doorman push a button for you. Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a problem pushing the button, and with my elbow, which I do quite often during the week, it wouldn't be unusual. What I'm questioning is, I know some, I don't want to say non-observant Jews, but less observant Jews that push the buttons anyhow. Now, could I have one of them do that for me?
No. You can't have a Jew do something that you think is, if there's a dispute in halakha, and both sides, if that Jew asks, his rabbi who said, yes, you can do this. No, because you can't benefit from someone else's violation of, you can't, some other Jew's prohibition.
They're doing it anyway. You should go with them.
So it's interesting. The halakha is actually more lenient for benefiting from a Jew's violation of Shabbat than for Gentiles, because the Talmudic rabbis were concerned that if they allowed you to benefit from a Gentile's malacha, then you might ask a Gentile to do it in a prohibited way, where nobody would even think of asking a Jew to do malacha. So they're less strict. I think to get into an elevator with a Jew who's pressing the button, I think it's not okay. I think you need to have some kind of that seems, even if as I said, there are some leniencies, I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's better for you to push it, maybe with your head or with your back. I think you could find a way to.
I have to try to find a non-Jew to do it.
Or maybe a neighbor who would do it for you.
I know when I had vertigo, and I was at least it was a while before I could even come to shul, but when I did, I had arranged in advance for a neighbor to push the button. And when I had other injuries. No, this one is probably the worst that we have.
No, you shouldn't be confined in your home by Shabbat. That Shabbat is not supposed to be a day that you're trapped at home. You should be, as best as you're able to, see people and be with people. And
the thing is, I can't walk to shul.
Somebody's
got to take me in a wheelchair.
Right. Which is that you could ask a Jew to do. That's not a violation of Shabbat to push the wheelchair.
And one coming home to, which is no issue with whether the Eruv is up or down.
Thank God the Eruv has been mostly. Yeah, that's also. Truth. Look, that's wheelchair without an Eruv is also interesting because that's also this is a carrying in our neighborhood is only a drabanan anyway, and if it's a non-Jew who's doing it, that's shut to shut. Maybe you go to shul. That's also you can make that argument. We'll daven in here, and thank you. Sorry, Jonathan, you had a question?
Oh yeah, I was wondering if you would come back to when you're planning prospectively about your behavior, once you have a shvut to shvut, is that totally acceptable as a clean slate, or should you try to avoid it?
I think shvut to shvut for makom mitzvah. So I think you're right. So I don't think you should
So like if
have
I'm
an
shopping for
elevator.
apartments, should I like not be looking at the 20th floor apartments?
Oh, no, I think that's fine. I mean, as long as you have a way to get down, I mean, getting down is this thing you have to contend with. Sorry, shvutas means a rabbinic violation. Shvut to shvut, a 2-degree rabbinic violation. Like asking a Gentile to violate a rabbinic prohibition, that's 2 degrees of, or doing a rabbinic violation with your elbow, that's 2 degrees of rabbinic violation. I think you're entitled to live. I think you're entitled to live on an upper floor. I don't think, it's reasonable to say a Jew has to live on a low floor so that you don't have to rely on these leniencies. These are well-founded leniencies. You're entitled to live in a place like that. I think it's fine. Okay. Ava?
So, sorry if this is covered, are you saying that it's sort of the same, considered the same thing, like doing shinoi or kind of asking?
No, I think it's better to ask the Gentile to do it if you can. I think like going up, like there's a doorman. Going down, I think it's good, if you can, I would recommend walking. And if you can't walk, then, and there is no way to have a Gentile do it for you, then I think it's okay to do it with a shinoi, like with an awkward way. That's the hierarchy. Hierarchy is walk down, and for getting down, I'd say walk, arrange for a Gentile, either the doorman sends the elevator up, or a neighbor brings you down, or if that's impossible, then to do it with the shinoi, it's, yeah, AJ.
2 questions. Shorter question, is it the same if you do with a shinoi or if a fellow Jew does it with a shinoi for you to use the elevator?
Yeah, no, I mean he's gonna go back to sleep?
He's going to go up an elevator with you.
So what, meaning, what, I don't know, so what?
So either like you do the shinoi yourself or I guess a less observant Jew, a less observant
No. I think you shouldn't use Jews in that way. I think like you should this is permissible. You should do it yourself. I think it's sort of bad to things get ugly when we use Jews in that way. I think it's and people are confused. I don't think it's there are circumstances where somebody might have a more lenient position that you wouldn't yourself rely upon, but you would still feel fine interacting with him in his, like Shlomo Zalman Auerbach also has a position on Heter Mechir. He doesn't believe he doesn't endorse the legal fiction sale of Eretz Yisrael during the Shemitah year to enable agriculture but he says even if you don't accept it, so if you're a farmer, don't avail yourself of this leniency. But if you're a consumer, there's no reason not to purchase it because the prohibitions, such as they exist, are on the farmer who's doing, but you're not the farmer, you're the consumer. And don't tell me, well, by purchasing it, I'm enabling him, I'm encouraging him. What?
They're creating demand.
You're creating demand, lifnei iver. It's not lifnei iver, it's not placing a stumbling block because that farmer is relying on an alternative halachic position. And it's not lifnei iver it's not a michshol, it's not a stumbling block if the other person is doing something that he thinks is permissible based on a credible halachic position, even if it's one that you don't accept. So even if you don't accept the Heter Mechira, that's fine, and you encourage that, but that's not, there's other, the other farmers, the farmer's allowed to accept it based on his position.
What do you do if you have a guest who is uncomfortable using electricity when that is needed to get to your apartment?
So you could say, look, the rabbi of your community says that since we live above the 5th floor, we can ask the doorman to push the button to let us up. And if you don't want to do that, let me arrange for you to have access to the stairs, and I'll have some cool water waiting for you at the top. I think most people, if you tell them that it's not like dati light. It's not like a casualness they're not casual about Shabbat, but that this is like something that was taught by the rabbi of your local Orthodox congregation, like this urban neighborhood says that you can ask a doorman or any Gentile to push a button to get above the 6th floor and up. I think that's, most people will understand that. I think it's not a crazy position. If you want to name drop, you can say this is, we just possibly from Soloveitchik and the Ramaz, and which is, consistent with the assumption of Shlomo Zalman. You can sort of name drop and say that's what we do here, and I think most people understand. And if not, look, I think it's fine. Like it's not a bad thing to be strict about Halakhot Shabbat, and most buildings, it's not, like you can walk 20 flights. It's not, for most people, it's not dangerous most of the time. And you'll wait for them, right? Okay, let's break for Mincha. Thank you so much for coming tonight.